Weekly Rushes, your rushed rush, caffeinated rush through all the weekly movie news and streaming news and just kind of tidbits of Hollywood news. Obviously, we start with some of the more sort of challenging stories, or the stories that kind of happen off screen, the sort of stories that aren't about filmmaking but sit on the margins of the film industry. And one of the top sort of tragic stories that's sort of broken in the last few days is the death of Cormac Roth, who was a musician but is also the son of Tim Roth, the actor Tim Roth. Tragically, he passed away on October 16th, a couple of weeks ago, after a year-long battle with what's been described as a rare cancer. He was just 25 years old. Cormac himself said of his condition prior to dying, in November 21st, I was diagnosed with stage 3 germ cell cancer. He talks about fighting it daily, throwing everything he can at it: chemo, high-dose chemo, medication, transplants, transfusion, surgeries. It's rare, he says. It managed to stay many steps ahead of him. It took away half of his hearing, 60 pounds of weight, his confidence, and he added, "It will continue to its murderous path until I can manage to stop it somehow and kill it." And tragically, obviously, he didn't. So all of our hearts go out to the actor Tim Roth, who has very sadly lost his 25-year-old son, which you can't even begin to imagine what he's feeling. Next up, Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry from Friends fame obviously has been doing the rounds. He's been promoting his sort of memoir, autobiography. It's entitled Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. I'm presuming the big terrible thing is his addiction, his mental health crises. Very publicly, he's sort of talked about, and he's gone through countless rehabs. He's in 12-step programs. He's got a completely new set of teeth. He's had all sorts of mental health breakdowns, and a lot of it's happened publicly. But he talks in his book about the support of his friends on Friends. But he also obviously has some pretty revealing things. But one thing that's kind of cropped up around the publicity for his book is something that he's had to apologise for. And I think it's right that he does apologise for it, especially if he's probably in a 12-step program. Part of that is making amends to those you hurt. Part of that is not sort of hurting others, really, in a sense. In his book, he talks a lot about those more meaningful friendships and actors that he's worked with or knew, but he also talks about actors that have been tragically lost, through, in circumstances not entirely dissimilar to the way in which Matthew Perry has almost lost his life on a few occasions. He talks about his close friend, River Phoenix, obviously Joaquin Phoenix's brother, who tragically died in LA. He also talks about Heath Ledger, the Joker, who tragically died. But he starts to use this phrase, or he uses this phrase throughout the book, and I'm curious to know whether they should edit the book and republish the book just on this basis. He used the phrase, and this is a quote from the book: "Why is it that the original thinkers, like River Phoenix and Heath Ledger, die, but Keanu Reeves still walks amongst us?" Later in the book, he talks about an incident where he punched a hole through Jennifer Aniston's dressing room wall. And he said, "I punched a hole through Jennifer Aniston's dressing room," he said, "wall when I found out." It's obviously in the context of something else. And he says again, "Keanu Reeves walks among us." The suggestion being that all these other things can happen, terrible things can happen to other people who, in a sense, he's suggesting are more worthy than Keanu Reeves, who tragically and rather frustratingly still walks amongst us. Not surprisingly, Keanu Reeves fans have been, there's been a backlash and there's been upset and there's been outrage and what have you. And Matthew Perry had to, earlier in the week, issue a statement stating, "I'm actually a big fan of Keanu. I just chose a random name, my mistake. I apologise. I probably should have used my own name instead." Is that enough? What do you think, guys? Should they re-edit the book? Should they delete those passages or those statements? It's a pretty damning and not particularly nice comment to make. Disney pushing for their diversity, pushing for inclusivity, pushing on the mental health front. They're debuting, or they're releasing, a series of films that kind of deal with body image, identity and self-esteem. As you know, Pixar have for many years made films that are laced through with a sort of social commentary. I think, was it called Red, the most recent film where a girl turns into a red panda, and that's all about coming of age for girls, periods, all that kind of stuff, hormones and what have you. Well, Disney are launching, or are releasing on Disney Plus, a short film called Reflect, and it's a film about a ballet dancer called Bianca. She battles with her own body image. She's a plus-size girl. She has to overcome doubt and fear, channeling what Disney describes her inner strength, her grace and power. A lot of people struggle with dysmorphia, body dysmorphia. I mean, I do, Nadia does. I mean, I think probably everyone in the Western world and in the 21st century struggles with body dysmorphia in some way. And so I think this is really good. Once again, we have Disney making sure there's diversity within the sort of role models of princesses and princes and what have you. And now body size and body image is being included. And I think, for all the criticism that we have of these conglomerate kind of corporations, I think if they move in this direction, it's got to be a good thing, right? Big news here for superhero fans and all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of you aren't necessarily into the superhero films, but James Gunn and Peter Safran. Peter Safran is a producer. James Gunn is a director and producer. Obviously, James Gunn was responsible for directing the Guardians of the Galaxy films. He did the kind of soft reboot, if you like, of Suicide Squad. He made the HBO Max series, Peacemaker. He's just released the holiday special trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy on Disney. Well, there's been lots of talk about where is he going to ultimately sit? Where is he going to settle? Is it going to be Marvel? Is he just going to keep doing stuff for Marvel? But no, he's been made, him and Peter Safran have been made co-chairman and CEO of DC Films at Warner Brothers. And this has been after a lot of chomping at the bit, a lot of discussion about who's going to be there, who's going to take over. And I think there is an issue, I was talking about this last week, with all superhero films. I think Marvel is at a point where I think they're reaching a saturation point, and I kind of think they need to take their foot off the pedal, a little bit like Disney realised they needed to for Star Wars. They need to inject a little bit of waiting. I think waiting is important in franchise building, anticipation, projection. The fan base can sort of chatter and all that kind of stuff and work out what's happening next. But also another aspect that I think is really important that I think Marvel does get right is interconnectivity between all the films. So obviously they do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, but there's been no one at DC, at the DC Extended Universe, DCEU, to kind of maintain a sort of consistent sort of puzzle that works, a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces kind of fit together, however different. I mean, I think you still have the frilly sort of Aquaman and Flash stuff or Shazam stuff. I think Peter Safran, the producer, is responsible for Shazam. But I do think they need someone to kind of pull this together. If I had any concern at all, I'm a huge James Gunn fan. I slightly worry, though, that perhaps all superhero films are falling down the hole of comedy only. Whereas actually I do think when you look at films like Joker, when you look at films like The Batman, there's a lot of scope to go interior and psychoanalytical. And so I hope there's a little bit more of that threaded through. I'm beginning to wonder whether, we're all getting a little bit tired of these kind of big blow-em-up movies and, the earth falling apart and just fights and battles and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so James Gunn, he's been made head of DC films, and I think that's a sensible move at this stage. The jury's out on whether he's exactly the right person, but maybe Peter Safran, the producer, will be able to sort of balance it. And on that note, obviously we've got the new Avatar film coming out this Christmas, and James Cameron has been obviously talking about this, he's been promoting it, he's discussing it. It's coming in at an epic, what do you think of this guy? It's coming in at an epic 3 hours and 10 minutes. Are films getting too long? I mean, even Triangle of Sadness, I'm struggling to find, which is the Palme d'Or esoteric kind of, film by is it a Swedish director? Trying to find 2.5 to 3 hours. If you then add the adverts, which is about half an hour, 3.5 hours, 4 hours in a day, that's a big commitment. So, Avatar is looking big. But anyway, James Cameron has come out, and I think he's got something interesting to say, and in a weird way, James Cameron, what he says could be something that James Gunn sort of digests and considers. He's talking about the fact that his sequel is set 15 years after his original film. The characters played by Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana, they've become more mature. He talks about the way in which his characters, I mean, he's sort of saying he's better than all the superhero people. Yeah, and he targets Marvel and DC. He says, I'm looking at you, Marvel and DC. He talks about the fact that all the characters in superhero films, it doesn't matter, he says exactly, it doesn't matter how old the characters are, they all act like they're in college. I kind of know what he means. He says they have relationships, but they don't really. They never hang up their spurs because of their kids. I think the only one I can think of who kind of semi-retires and kind of goes back to normal life is Hawkeye, isn't it, in one of the films? And he's talking about, we need things to ground these characters. And in a weird way, this kind of goes back to what I've been saying about going interior, internal, in terms of, plot and character devices. And I think you need to, in a weird way, the Batman and Joker, they're more realistically positioned within the superhero film. So I'm not a big fan necessarily of Avatar. I'm not a big fan necessarily of James Cameron, but I think he has a point. I think the characters characters in Marvel films could be more plugged into the natural narratives of a real life, if you like. On that note, Henry Cavill released a post on Instagram. Why don't we watch it? He's essentially, obviously, spoiler alert, he features in the end credits or mid-credits sequence of Black Adam. He's coming back. He's not necessarily coming back in a dedicated Superman film or a Man of Steel film or anything like that, but I think he could be coming back and is coming back with Black Adam. And he released this on Instagram. Let's take a look. It's just a nice shot there of him in profile. I wish I had that profile chest.
Hey everyone, I wanted to wait until the weekend was over before posting this because I wanted to give you all a chance to watch Black Adam. But now that plenty of you have, I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman. And the image you see on this post and what you saw in Black Adam are just a very small taste of things to come. So there's a lot to be thankful for, and I'll get to that in time, but I want to thank you guys most of all. Thank you for your support and thank you for your patience. I promise it will be rewarded.
Whoa. Apparently it's quite unusual for a sort of star or a studio or whatever to sort of team up with Instagram and do something like that. I don't exactly know how they teamed up with Instagram. Maybe it was the whoosh sound, the whooshing sound. No talk, as I say, of Man of Steel 2, but presumably he is going to come back in Black Adam. Is he going to go head-to-head with Black Adam? Who knows? We were talking about the Joker, we were talking about Joaquin Phoenix, we were talking about his brother River Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix and his wife, Rooney Mara, are boarding a new film by Pawlikowski. Pawlikowski directed films like My Summer of Love, Lost in Kazakhstan, Cold War, famously made a film called Ida. He's making a film called The Island, and this sounds curious. It sounds almost a little bit like The Menu, where, the Ray Fiennes film, where all these sort of, rich people, basically. There's a lot of films about rich people heading off and being destroyed. If you think of Triangle of Sadness too, all on a sort of expensive yacht. Well, this is about an American 1930s couple played by Phoenix and Mara. They turn their back on civilization. They want the good life, but it's a sort of very posh good life. And so they build their own paradise on a deserted island, a bit Robinson Crusoe-esque. Sounds fun. But after a millionaire passes on a yacht, I wonder if it's the same yacht from Triangle of Sadness. They turn into a sort of newspaper sensation. They sort of it's publicised that they've essentially done this, and then suddenly this sort of countess arrives, and then it becomes their tranquility is poisoned, if you like, and then all sorts of stuff like a luxury hotel comes. Again, a bit like White Lotus-y type thing. There's seduction, there's infidelity, there's sex, there's all this kind of stuff. So this is a new genre at the moment, isn't it, of the uber rich being sort of pulled down a peg or two, or challenged, or squeezed. We've talked before about Sean Durkin's project, The Iron Claw, at A24. Sean Durkin made The Nest with Jude Law recently, and he made Marcy May with Elizabeth Olsen. Cracking movie, do check it out. This is The Iron Claw, which is based on it's a little bit like Fighting with the Family, the Florence Pugh wrestling film. This is a film about the Von Erichs, which was a wrestling family, and it looks at the rise and fall of their family, if you like, their impact on the sport, their fall from grace, and all that kind of stuff, right up to the present day. Zac Efron is in it, Harris Dickinson is in it, and now Lily James is joining, and obviously Lily James is coming off the back of her success with Pam and Tommy, so that's thickening out to be quite a project called The Iron Claw. Chris Pine, I wonder if he's got over. I wonder if he's taken his trousers to the dry cleaner, after Harry Styles spat on them at the Don't Worry Darling premiere at the Venice Film Festival. Chris Pine is making his directorial debut with a really curiously odd film called Pool Man. I was hoping this was going to be something like that Burt Lancaster film from years ago, in which he sort of swam through the pools of a suburban neighbourhood and all that kind of stuff. Chris Pine is directing. He's got a cracking cast. Annette Bening, he's got Danny DeVito, he's got DeWanda Wise, Jennifer Jason Leigh, always curious, and Ray Wise from Twin Peaks. Pool Man follows Chris Pine, his character, as a pool boy. Is he a bit old for a pool boy? Cleaning an apartment block pool and gate crashing city council meetings with neighbourhood friends. Okay, so suddenly it's become quite civic. It's like going to council meetings. Oh yeah, how weird's that? He discovers there are plans to rob Los Angeles of its water. Eh? And then he sort of becomes this sort of undercover sort of detective and tries to save the city. Where the fuck does an idea like that come from? And then when you sit and pitch it, don't people go, why are people stealing water from Los Angeles? I'm sure it'll all come clear. I mean, these things do wash out, but there's so many projects where you think, how the bloody hell does that get made off the paper? So that's Chris Pine making his directorial debut, and he's starring. Next story we talked about on the Popcorn Junkies Instagram account. This is Florence Pugh is joining Alexander Skarsgård. You'll know Skarsgård from The Northman. You'll also know him from Big Little Lies. He obviously played Nicole Kidman's abusive husband. Florence Pugh, who's also shooting Dune Part 2, she's set to become the lead character in a film called The Pack. And this film sounds intriguing. It follows, I'll give it a blow, a group of documentary makers who brave the wilderness in Alaska. So we go from Alaska, and then they're brought back together at an award ceremony. Presumably their documentary gets nominated for something, and then tension develops between all of the team. Will they survive the night of an award ceremony, even though they survived the Alaskan wilderness? And I think this might be quite curious. I think this could be fun. Once again, this could be about the creative pressure and creative egos. And Alexander Skarsgård, I believe, is co-starring in it, but it's also Alexander Skarsgård's directorial debut, I believe. So quite a few actors now going behind the camera. Talking of Henry Cavill, obviously, he's about to be Superman again. Him and Eiza Gonzalez are to lead Guy Ritchie's World War II action spy pick called, great title, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Apparently this is inspired by real-life events. Apparently the UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill and the writer of James Bond, Ian Fleming, created a secret World War II combat group. They became known as the sort of Black Ops unit, and they fought in an ungentlemanly way using techniques that we'd rather not think about against the Nazis. This is going to be a sort of action film. It's directed by Guy Ritchie. Obviously, it's feeling like, if I'm honest, it's feeling a little bit like Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. I'm guessing they're going to sort of be bringing together a sort of misfit band of fighters who go to extraordinary lengths. There's a big thing for this at the moment, isn't there? There's the Thunderbolts film coming from Marvel. This idea of sort of morally dubious and willing to go to any lengths to achieve their goals groups setting out to kill people. Any fans of Wicked, the Broadway musical? I have to say we saw it. Can't say I was enamoured with it. We've got our Wizard. They're being directed by John M. Chu. They're making both movies. They're making two movies, rather, of the Broadway show. It's a two-part release. But Jeff Goldblum is playing the Wizard in this prequel story, if you like. Ariana Grande is going to be is it Galinda or Glinda in it? And Elphaba is going to be played by Cynthia Erivo. So the cast is really good. And Bridgerton's Jonathan Bailey is also going to be in there. So these are planned for Christmas 2024 and Christmas 2025. I think Jeff Goldblum's great. I mean, Jeff Goldblum always plays himself, if you think of him in Thor. So, him as a curious wizard, I think could be exciting. Any fans of Sausage Party? I never saw Sausage Party, but apparently it was an incredibly scatological, outrageously humorous sort of animated movie, adult animated movie, in which things like food orgies and all the kind of vegetables and food in a shop all have sex and what have you. It was created by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. They're doing a Sausage Party spin-off series for TV called Sausage Party Foodtopia. It was full of sex jokes, as I say, food orgies and what have you. But the quote, I quite like this kind of press release from Seth Rogen and Goldberg. They're being quite sarcastic, but it's quite funny. Film used to be the superior art form to telly, and we humbly reached the pinnacle of what we set out to achieve with Sausage Party. But now that film is completely dead and TV is the king of entertainment. We've decided to continue the epic adventures of our culinary crew in the soon-to-be legendary televised masterpiece Sausage Party Foodtopia. It's got all the heart, double the puns and triple the food on food sex. In other words, it's exactly what the world needs right now. Could be fun, could be scatological, could be, there is a trend at the moment, isn't there, for sort of animated series that are supremely adult. I'm excited about this one. Disney Plus are in discussions regarding a Vision series. Vision, obviously played by Paul Bettany, one of the Avengers. He was in the WandaVision, very emotional, very complex, one of my favourite Disney Plus series. If you ever want to watch something on Disney Plus, I would recommend you go to WandaVision. This is the second spin-off from the WandaVision sort of series, if you like. The other one is Agatha, House of Harkness, which is obviously starring Catherine Hahn, who's fantastic. Vision Quest, they're calling it White Vision because of course it becomes the White Vision at the end, doesn't it? And it could be, this spin-off could be about him sort of trying to reconnect with Elizabeth Olsen. I think I'd be very excited if she comes back. Their relationship was tragic, it was emotional, it was really moving, it was thought-provoking. For me, it's where superhero films need to go to. Paul Bettany has said in the past, it was a beautiful culmination for all these things Elizabeth and I have done together. We found a lane for ourselves. He said, but you never know with Marvel whether you're done or not, so I don't want to call it the end yet. Paul Bettany is soon to be seen in a movie adaptation of The Collaboration, which is his play in which he plays Andy Warhol. Who remembers Siegfried and Roy? I mean, I don't know particularly much about them. Apparently there's a very successful Apple podcast or a podcast based on their lives. But Siegfried and Roy were the curious German-American entertainers, Las Vegas entertainers. And they used to appear with white lions and white tigers in all these hotels in Las Vegas. I think they've both died. I think one of them died of COVID last year. But famously, do you remember in 2003, I think it was, a white tiger attacked the guy called Roy Horn whilst they were on stage at the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas. Well, this is going to be telling a series of hour-long episodes, and it's going to be telling the story of the pair. I mean, I could never work them out. There's something about that sort of Vegas Strip, stage show where there's a sort of plasticity, isn't there? And a sort of kind of heightened reality or heightened artificiality, actually. If you think of Liberace and all that kind of big rings and sort of glossy stuff and white lions and white tigers, I mean, it's so weird. So I think this could end up being really intriguing and really odd. It's almost like sort of high-end Tiger King type stuff that we could get here. So I'm quite excited about that. Any fans of Stephen Graham? We're huge fans of Stephen Graham. Obviously, he starred in the one-take film, Boiling Point, which was about a chef sort of who's addicted to drugs, trying to run his kitchen, sort of failing miserably. And, it was a one-take, energised, incredibly ambitious film. I'm not entirely sure it worked. And I think, in a sense, with the series The Bear that's now landed, this concept or this series could be under challenge, because The Bear is an incredibly successful, incredibly stressful, intense, adrenaline-fueled portrait of a high-end chef in a sort of family restaurant trying to hold the business together. Well, Boiling Point, the film, is now being turned into a series. We're not entirely sure whether Stephen Graham will star in it, because, of course, at the end of the movie, he was in a bit of a parlour state, I think on the floor, wasn't he, or something. So this series is going to pick things up 6 months later. The filmmakers are saying that they're not necessarily going to go for the one-shot concept, though there are going to be long shots in it. I don't entirely think that it's an innovative thing. Yeah, it's kind of clever to do, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself to the best storytelling. So I don't think they should get hung up on just maintaining the one shot for the sake of the one shot, because then it becomes style over substance and all that. But I think this could be interesting. But as I say, I think you're going to be hard pushed to better The Bear. Any Witcher fans out there? Very quick story on the Witcher fans. Henry Cavill, yet again, he's everywhere, isn't it? Is hanging up his boots as the Witcher. I haven't seen it. I tried episode 1, just haven't had time to kind of stick with it. Season 3 hasn't come out, but season 4 is obviously being planned, and Liam Hemsworth is going to be replacing Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia. Hemsworth said, "As a Witcher fan, I'm over the moon about the opportunity to play Geralt of Rivia. Henry Cavill had been an incredible Geralt, and I'm honoured that he's handing me the reins and allowing me to take up the White Wolf's blades for the next chapter of his adventure." And I presume this again adds fuel to the story that Henry Cavill is obviously donning Superman's suit and cape and entering back into the DC extended universe. So that's Liam Hemsworth. I know a lot of you are fans of The Witcher, and it's got a huge fan base. So, curious to know what you think about Liam Hemsworth taking on the lead role. Which brings us to Films of the Week. And Films of the Week, there are 3 big films. Well, All Quiet on the Western Front was released a week ago at the cinemas, but is now released on Netflix. Our review is on the channel. A more moving, intense, traumatising, arresting World War I film you will not get. In many regards, I personally think it's possibly better than even 1917, because you get a true sense of the scale and scope of World War I. It's told from the German perspective, it's based on the book, incredibly, astonishingly shot, sensitively dealt with, brutally portrayed. The next film that's been released is Triangle of Sadness. This is by the director of The Square. It's also his first feature film was Force Majeure. Brilliant film about a family crumbling apart after a father almost tries to save himself first in an avalanche and doesn't protect his family. This is Triangle of Sadness. As I said, this is a film set on a high-end luxury yacht. It's about rich people being held around. So this is below deck, and basically the clients or the people travelling on the boat get their comeuppance terribly. They get held around. Woody Harrelson is in there as an alcoholic Marxist captain. Kind of curious place to find yourself on a sort of luxury multi-million-pound yacht. Lot of vomit, lot of toilets exploding, and apparently a very stomach-churning central 20 minutes that one has to cope with. I'm just still trying to find time to go and see it. And the other film released is a horror film called Barbarian, which I will be reviewing in the next couple of days. This is a cut above the rest. I didn't like Smile. I didn't think it was great. This is creepy. This is odd. The concept's really good. It's got Bill Skarsgård in there. Georgina Campbell plays the woman who basically heads to an Airbnb and discovers it's been double booked, then discovers a door down into a basement. You're screaming all the way through it. Nope, nope, don't go down there, don't go down there. This is the deepest, longest, most cavernous basement you've ever known at the bottom of a house. It's deeply disturbing, it's incredibly scary, it's really creepy, and the lead thing in it is really, really unsettling. So I would fully recommend that if you want a real Halloween hit. It's an 18 certificate, so gird your loins. And there you have this week's Weekly Rushes, your rush through all the movie and streaming news this week. Tell us what you thought about all the stories, and I hope you have a fantastic film watching week.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.